Welcome to our deep dive into Zen Anarchy by Max Cafard.
This is a good one.
It is. It's a book that explores the surprisingly rebellious heart of Zen Buddhism.
Yeah.
It's broken down into 4 parts, and believe me, Cafard doesn't hold back. He dives deep into Zen history, using stories and quotes from key figures to really shake things up.
What's fascinating about Zen Anarchy is how the book itself embodies this anarchic spirit.
Right.
Cafard doesn't lay out like a neat step-by-step guide to Zen.
Right.
Instead, it's more like he's throwing these playful jabs at our expectations of what Zen or even religion in general should be.
Right off the bat, in the first section, Smashing States of Consciousness, Cafard introduces this core idea of Zen anarchy, that it's about rejecting all arches or fixed ideas, habits, and prejudices that create the illusion that we control reality. It seems counterintuitive, but he's arguing that to really experience the world freely, we have to let go of that need for control. What do you think about that?
I think it speaks to that common misconception that Zen is about emptying your mind and becoming detached from the world.
Yeah.
Cafard is really pushing back against that,
Yeah.
emphasizing that it's the opposite. It's about being fully present and engaged with the world, but without letting our egos call all the shots.
Right.
And for some, that can feel like a kind of anarchy.
It definitely goes against the grain of how we're usually taught to approach life, right? Trying to control and plan everything. And Cafard makes it clear that Zen anarchy isn't some watered-down version of Buddhism. He calls it the strictest and most super-orthodox form.
Right.
Because it strips away the dogma and rituals that can build up over time, taking us straight to the heart of what it means to have an awakened mind.
And that word Buddha really just means awakened mind.
Yeah.
Zen practice, especially meditation, is all about cultivating that awareness, that ability to see things clearly without the filter of our preconceived notions.
So to illustrate this, Cafard uses 2 origin stories that on the surface seem completely different. There's the classic image of Shakyamuni Buddha achieving enlightenment under the Bodhi tree after intense meditation. That seems to fit the stereotypical image of what Zen is all about, right?
But then he throws in the flower sermon,
Right.
which is so quintessentially Zen in its irony.
Yes.
The Buddha's giving a sermon. Everyone's expecting some profound words of wisdom, and he just silently holds up a flower.
Yeah.
And everyone's baffled, except for one guy, Kashyapa, who gets it and smiles.
That story is such a great example of how Zen can be so baffling and so funny at the same time. It's like, what does a flower have to do with enlightenment? But the point is that there's nothing to get intellectually. It's about direct experience, beyond words and concepts.
And that brings us to this idea of emptiness, or sunyata, a key concept that Cafard spends quite a bit of time unpacking. The Buddha taught that all things are empty, of inherent existence, meaning they don't exist in isolation, but are interconnected and constantly changing. You, me, this microphone, we all depend on countless other things for our existence.
That makes me think about how we tend to see ourselves as separate, independent entities,
Right.
when in reality, we're completely interwoven with everything around us. That's kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it. But if everything is empty, does that mean life is meaningless? Like, what's the point of anything?
That's where the Heart Sutra comes in, one of the most important Buddhist texts.
Yeah.
It flat out states that all things, even the fundamental tenets of Buddhism itself, are empty. But it's not about nihilism or saying nothing matters. It's about understanding emptiness as a starting point for genuine freedom.
So it's not about giving up. It's about letting go of those rigid ideas that cause us so much suffering.
Exactly. Cafard quotes the Buddha's arrow analogy to illustrate this. If you're shot with an arrow, the priority is to remove the arrow, not to spend time analyzing where it came from or who shot it. Similarly, in Zen, the focus is on alleviating suffering by recognizing the impermanence and interconnectedness of all things.
Okay, I'm starting to see how understanding emptiness could actually be really empowering rather than depressing. So how does compassion fit into all of this? Is Zen just about sitting around contemplating the void?
That's another common misconception that Cafard addresses head-on.
Yeah.
Zen is not about withdrawing from the world, but engaging with it fully. And that's where compassion becomes essential.
Because it would be easy to misinterpret this idea of emptiness as an excuse to be selfish or indifferent, right?
Exactly. Cafard emphasizes that recognizing our interconnectedness should naturally lead to compassion for ourselves and others. He highlights the Bodhisattva vow, beings are countless, I vow to save them all. It's a powerful expression of that commitment to alleviating suffering.
Wow, save them all. That's a pretty tall order. It really underscores the immense scope of compassion that Zen encourages. But how do you actually live that out in the real world? Does Zen offer any practical guidance?
It absolutely does. And Cafard uses some really vivid analogies to illustrate how Zen practice can be integrated into everyday life. For instance, he quotes Hui-Neng, who said, "Seeking enlightenment apart from the world is like looking for crawfish tails on a nutria."
Okay. I'll admit I might need a quick Google search to figure out what a nutria is, but the analogy is clear. Enlightenment isn't found in some far-off realm. It's right here in the midst of our messy, complicated lives.
Exactly. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of Zen that Cafard tackles, the concept of the self.
Okay, this is where things start to get really interesting. Because if everything is empty, what does that mean for our sense of who we are?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Cafard really digs into this idea that our concept of a solid, independent self is actually a source of a lot of our suffering. We cling to this idea of who we are, but ultimately it's just another construct, another arch that keeps us from experiencing true freedom.
So it's like we're holding on to a sandcastle while the tide is coming in, clinging to something that's inevitably going to wash away.
Perfect analogy. And this is where Zen gets really radical. Cafard explains that true Zen practice involves recognizing that the true self is no self, meaning our sense of individuality is an illusion. We are, at our core, interconnected with everything else.
That's a lot to wrap your head around. If there's no self, then what's the point of practicing anything? Does it even matter what we do?
That's a natural question to ask.
Yeah.
And it leads us to some of the most provocative and challenging aspects of Zen, which Cafard dives into in the next section of the book.
Ooh, this is where things get really interesting. Let's dive in.
This next section is called Killing the Buddha, Zen's Assault on Authority.
Oh,
And it might seem like a contradiction, but we've got these images of strict Zen masters,
yeah.
sometimes even hitting their students with sticks.
Right.
Not exactly what comes to mind when you think of freedom and anarchy.
I know, right? It seems counterintuitive, but Cafard argues that at its core, Zen is actually deeply anti-authoritarian. He quotes Shakyamuni Buddha himself, who said, "Work out your own salvation with diligence."
Yeah.
It's about taking responsibility for your own spiritual journey, not blindly following anyone else.
And it makes sense when you think about the idea of the awakened mind.
Yeah.
If Zen practice is about cultivating your own direct experience of reality,
Right.
then relying too heavily on external authorities, teachers, scriptures, dogmas can actually become a hindrance.
So it's about trusting your own inner compass, that inner wisdom that Cafard says we all have access to.
Precisely. And Hui-Neng, the sixth patriarch of Zen, really drives this point home.
Right.
He says, Scripture clearly says to take refuge in the Buddha in oneself, not to take refuge in another Buddha. You have to find that Buddha within yourself, not out there in the world.
That's a powerful statement. But this rejection of authority goes even deeper, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about external figures like teachers or texts, but also about challenging the authority of our own egos.
Absolutely. Cafard points out that external authorities only have power over us because we give them power in our minds.
Right.
We internalize those voices of authority, and they can easily become obstacles on our path to genuine freedom.
So it's about breaking free from those internal and external limitations.
Yes. And Cafard introduces us to Lin-Chi, the founder of the Rinzai school of Zen,
Okay.
who was notorious for his radical, no-holds-barred approach to dismantling authority.
I've heard of him. Doesn't he have that famous saying about killing the Buddha?
He does. Lin-Chi says, if you meet a Buddha, kill the Buddha. If you meet a patriarch, kill the patriarch. If you meet an arhat, kill the arhat. If you meet your parents, kill your parents. If you meet your kinfolk, kill your kinfolk.
Whoa. That's pretty intense. I'm guessing he's not advocating for actual murder here.
Definitely not. It's a metaphor.
Yeah.
A very dramatic one, meant to shake us out of our blind adherence to any authority,
Yeah.
even those we love and respect.
So it's about recognizing those attachments we have to people, to ideas, to institutions, and seeing how they might be holding us back from realizing our full potential.
Exactly. And Cafard even takes it a step further, suggesting that true Zen practice involves questioning everything, even our most cherished beliefs and traditions. He compares the Buddha to a hole in a privy, which is, well, it's not the most reverent image, to say the least.
Okay, that's a new one. It definitely challenges those idealized images we often have of spiritual figures.
But that's classic Zen, shocking, irreverent, thought-provoking. It's all about shaking things up, seeing things from a fresh perspective.
So if we manage to kill all those Buddhas, both inside and out, what are we left with? What does that kind of freedom actually look like?
Well, according to Zen, We're left with our own true nature, our own awakened mind. But another criticism that often comes up is that Zen can seem overly ritualistic with all its practices and ceremonies.
Yeah, and I can see how that might seem contradictory to the whole anarchy thing.
Yeah.
How does Cafard reconcile those two seemingly opposite aspects of Zen?
He tackles it head-on, explaining that Zen is actually a critique of ritualism.
Hmm.
The problem, he says, arises when rituals become a substitute for genuine practice, when they feed that sense of religious ego.
Yeah.
That pride or superiority that can come from following rules and traditions.
I can see how that could happen. It's like those people who get so caught up in the outward forms of religion that they completely miss the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hui-Neng was particularly critical of empty ritualism. He emphasized that rituals should never become a distraction from cultivating genuine qualities like kindness, compassion, and wisdom. It's about what you're cultivating internally, not just the actions you're performing outwardly.
It's like the saying, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
Exactly. And Cafard even cautions against making a fetish out of sitting meditation,
Yeah.
Zazen, which is often seen as the quintessential Zen practice.
So it's not about spending hours on a cushion trying to empty your mind.
While Zazen is valuable, it shouldn't be the end goal. It's meant to be a tool for cultivating an awakened mind that you can bring to every aspect of your life, not just when you're sitting in meditation.
That makes sense. It's about integrating that mindfulness and awareness into everything you do.
Precisely. And that brings us to another really intriguing element of Zen, the use of koans.
Ah, yes, koans.
Yeah.
Those paradoxical riddles that Zen masters are famous for using to challenge their students, like, what is the sound of one hand clapping?
Exactly. Cafard dedicates a whole section of the book to exploring the world of koans, which he calls entering the jet stream.
So are koans just riddles with some hidden meaning that you're supposed to figure out?
They're more than just riddles. They're designed to provoke a shift in consciousness, to help you break through your habitual ways of thinking.
So more like mental grenades that explode your preconceived notions.
That's a great way to put it. Cafard introduces some famous koans like, does a dog have Buddha nature?
And the classic answer, moo. I've heard that one before, but I'm still not sure what it means.
Mu is a word that goes beyond a simple yes or no answer. It points to a deeper understanding that can't be grasped through logic or language alone.
So it's more about the process of grappling with the koan than coming up with the right answer.
Yes, it's about shifting your perspective, seeing things from a completely new angle. Cafard warns that even trying to explain mu can become a trap, because then you're just creating another concept to cling to.
So even the explanation of a koan can become its own kind of arch. It seems like it would be easy to get caught in a loop, always trying to figure things out intellectually.
That's the paradox of Zen. The more you try to grasp it, the more it slips away. That's why Zen masters are so careful about how they use koans. They're not meant to be intellectual puzzles, they're tools for awakening.
Okay, I'm starting to understand how tricky these koans can be. Can you give us another example?
Sure. Cafard tells the story of Nansen and the cat. It's a classic Zen anecdote that shows just how spontaneous and even baffling those Kanoian encounters can be.
I love these Zen stories. They're so strange and unexpected. What happens with the cat?
Well, a group of monks at Nansen's temple are arguing about a cat. We don't know the specifics of the argument,
Right.
but it's causing a lot of tension. So Nansen walks in, holds up the cat, and says, if you can say something, I won't kill it. If you can't say anything, I will.
Wow, that's a high-stakes situation. What did the monks say?
They were completely stumped. They couldn't figure out what Nansen wanted them to say, so he killed the cat. Later, Joshu, another well-known Zen master, returns to the temple and hears about what happened. Nansen asks him, if you had been here, could you have saved the cat?
So what did Joshu do? Did he come up with some brilliant Zen-like answer?
He takes off his sandal, puts it on his head, and walks out.
Okay. That's definitely a head-scratcher. What's
Yeah.
the meaning behind that?
Like most koans, it's open to interpretation, but it's often seen as a gesture of defiance or refusal to play by the rules of logic and reason. It embodies that spontaneous, non-logical aspect of Zen. He's not trying to come up with the right answer. He's expressing his understanding in a completely unconventional way.
So it's like he's saying, you can't box me in with your logic and rules. I'm going to transcend all that.
Exactly. Cafard suggests that Joshu's action is a form of opposite-way thinking, a key principle in Zen. It's about turning things upside down, challenging our usual way of thinking.
So it's about getting comfortable with ambiguity, with not knowing. That can be a real challenge for a lot of us, I think.
It definitely goes against the grain of how we're often conditioned to think. And Cafard reminds us that there's no one right interpretation of any koan. They're meant to provoke a deeper understanding, not to provide a single definitive answer.
Okay, I'm starting to get a sense of how koans work. Can we look at one more example before we move on?
Sure. Cafard introduces the shit stick koan, which is one of the most well-known and, well, provocative ones out there.
Shit stick. Now that's an image that's sure to stick with you.
A monk asks Unman, a Zen master, "What is Buddha?" And Unman replies, "A shit stick."
Whoa. That's not what you'd expect to hear in a religious context.
It's definitely not your typical Sunday school answer,
Yeah.
but it's classic Zen. Shocking, irreverent, and ultimately profound.
So what's the meaning behind the shit stick?
Well, Cathar explores a few possible interpretations. Literally, a shit stick was a tool used in ancient China to clean up excrement.
Right.
So it's a very humble, practical object.
Not exactly what you'd associate with enlightenment.
Right. But that's part of the point. Zen is about finding enlightenment in the midst of the ordinary, the mundane, even the messy parts of life.
It's about seeing the sacred and the profane.
Exactly. And symbolically, the shit stick can be seen as a way to break down those attachments we have to concepts like holiness and purity.
So it's about letting go of those rigid categories and judgments that we impose on the world, seeing things as they are without all the mental baggage.
You got it. It's like saying everything is ultimately just stuff, even the Buddha. And as with all koans, the point is to provoke a deeper understanding, not to arrive at a single correct answer.
These koans are like mental wrenches, loosening up our rigid thinking patterns.
That's a great way to put it. They're designed to help us see the world with fresh eyes.
So after all this talk about killing Buddhas and, well, shit sticks, where do we go from here? What are we supposed to take away from all of this?
That's a great question. And in the final section, Last Words, Cafard shares some parting wisdom from Huang, a renowned Zen master.
Okay, let's hear what Huang has to say. I'm all ears.
Huang keeps it simple. He tells his students to overlook his foolish grumblings and to take good care of themselves.
It sounds so basic, but there's a depth to it, isn't there?
There is. Cafard connects this back to some of the core themes we've been exploring. Humility, self-compassion, and the importance of living a balanced life. It's a reminder that Zen isn't about reaching some lofty spiritual goal far off in the distance. It's about cultivating wisdom and peace right here, right now, in the midst of our everyday lives.
It's a good reality check. So after diving deep into Zen anarchy and all these mind-bending concepts, what does all this mean for us, for the listener out there navigating their own life? How can we apply these ideas practically?
That's the question, isn't it? And like a true Zen master, Cafard doesn't give us a neat and tidy answer. Instead, he leaves us with more questions, more things to ponder.
So it's more about sparking that curiosity, that desire to keep exploring these ideas and discovering what they mean for each of us individually.
Exactly. Cafard wants us to take these ideas and wrestle with them, see how they resonate with our own experiences and how we relate to the world.
So it's not about adopting a rigid set of beliefs or practices. It's more about embodying that anarchic spirit, that willingness to question everything in our own unique way.
Yes. It's about challenging those external authorities that we've maybe blindly accepted and even confronting the authority of our own egos. It's about finding that inner freedom that comes from letting go of fixed ideas.
That resonates with me. It's so easy to get caught up in those shoulds and shouldn'ts that we impose on ourselves and that society throws at us. But it sounds like Zen anarchy is about finding a different way, a path that's more aligned with our true nature.
It is. And it's important to remember that this kind of freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about living in accordance with that awakened mind, with that deeper understanding of interconnectedness and impermanence that Zen points to.
It's a lifelong journey then, not a destination you arrive at.
Definitely. It's a continuous process of self-discovery and letting go. And it can be challenging, requiring a lot of self-awareness and honesty, but ultimately it's about opening ourselves up to a richer, more authentic experience of life.
I can see how that would be incredibly rewarding, even if it's not always easy.
It is rewarding. When we release those rigid ideas and attachments, we open ourselves up to experiencing the world in a whole new way. We become more present, more compassionate, more alive.
That's beautiful. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Zen anarchy, I'm left with this one thought. Cafard talks about how everything, even the self, is ultimately empty. If that's the case, what does that mean for our understanding of freedom and responsibility? Are they even possible if there's no solid self making choices?
That's a profound question, and it's one we all have to grapple with on our own, but I think it points to a crucial insight. Even if we don't believe in the solid, independent self, our actions still have consequences.
So even though everything is interconnected, our choices still matter.
Absolutely. In fact, recognizing our interconnectedness makes our choices even more significant. Our actions don't just impact us, they ripple outwards, affecting everyone and everything around us.
It's a powerful reminder that freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. We have the freedom to make choices, but we also have a responsibility to choose wisely, to consider the impact of our actions on the larger web of life.
Exactly. And I think that's a fitting place to end our exploration of Zen anarchy. Cafard has given us a lot to think about, a lot to chew on. It's up to each of us to
No.
take these ideas and see where they lead us on our own journeys.
So as you go about your day, listener, I encourage you to keep these ideas in mind, challenge those assumptions, question the authority figures in your life, and most importantly, take good care of yourself. And if you're feeling adventurous, maybe try putting a sandal on your head.
You never know, it might just lead to enlightenment. Until next time, keep diving deep.
So even though everything is interconnected, our choices still matter.
Absolutely. In fact, recognizing our interconnectedness makes our choices even more significant.
Right.
Our actions don't just impact us, they ripple outwards,
Yeah.
affecting everyone and everything around us.
It's a powerful reminder that freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. We have the freedom to make choices, but we also have responsibility to choose wisely, to consider the impact of our actions on the larger web of life.
Exactly. And I think that's a fitting place to end our exploration of Zen anarchy. Cafard has given us a lot to think about, a lot to chew on. It's up to each of us to take these ideas and see where they lead us on our own journeys.
So as you go about your day, listener, I encourage you to keep these ideas in mind. Challenge those assumptions, question the authority figures in your life, and most importantly, take good care of yourself. And if you're feeling adventurous, maybe try putting a sandal on your head.
You never know, it might just lead to enlightenment. Until next time, keep diving deep.